So, hi everyone. It's so lovely to see you. It feels like a sort of a quantum lifetime has passed since I was last here. Yes, I'm going to weave in a bit of the story, and I just wanted to take us back to our last session where we were talking about Vada, the fairy queen of Tolkien's creation, crossing the galactic center, and her twin flame, Manwë, who is a sort of leader of these 14 archangels in the Silmarillion, which preceded Lord of the Rings, and they create the inner earth using song, the middle earth rather, using song. So from that, sometimes this happens with the asteroids and the TNOs, like you touch them and you get like a major initiation. And this is what this felt like the past few weeks. Most of you will know Adam developed sepsis really quickly, was admitted to hospital. It was 12 days in all, and had a very near kind of death experience. And I kind of went into this incredible, it's like the healer in me awoke, my devotion awoke, and I was completely focused on helping him live, basically. And it felt like a very shamanic illness, like celestial fire just raging through his system. Yeah, his temperature got up to 40 degrees at one point, probably the worst day, and a real confrontation with death as well. So it feels like it was related to Manwë and Vada, but now I'm approaching Sedna, and we're going to be talking a little bit about a body called Mors-Somner today. Mors means death and Somnus means dream, who is conjunct Sedna. It feels like we're in a big collective initiation, mutation. If you have planets early in the fixed signs or late in the cardinal signs, so the fixed signs are Leo, Aquarius, Taurus, and brain's not working. There's another one. And then the cardinal signs, or late in the cardinal signs, which are the ones that change the season. So Libra, Cancer, Capricorn, and there's another one as well. My brain is still half working, as you can
Aries.
Aries, that's it. Thank you, Pat. So if you have planets around the end of the cardinal, beginning of the fixed signs, they're going to be very intensely activated at the moment. By Pluto's entered Aquarius, and today we're going to be focusing on Sedna, who's actually leaving Taurus and moving into Gemini. But there's quite a few other ones moving as well, like Haumea, the Hawaiian goddess of rebirth. She's going to be moving into Scorpio as well. So there's a lot of this collective outer energy going through these big shifts. And so today we're kind of taking a bite size, if you like, of Sedna, and seeing what we can make of the shift. And yeah, and I feel like this experience I've just had can kind of shed some light anyway, at least from my perspective, on what's going on. Okay, before we jump into Sedna, I just want to let you know about a few things coming up. So next Sunday at 8 a.m, we're going to be doing a shamanic sound journey, going on a journey to meet Sedna. On the 22nd of July, the Venus retrograde starts, and it lasts for 40 days. Some of you may actually have joined. That's when I began this on Soul Tribe was the last 40-day retrograde. And it's going to go through, it's going to open the siddhis through a mudra practice of devotion, forgiveness, virtue, and revelation. So it's going to run from 22nd of July every day, all through until early September. And there will be a practice video. So if you want to just do it in your own time, you can as well. In August, we're going to begin the Gene Keys rebirth sequence, which is basically the activation sequence backwards. And it feels very rebirthing energies right now. And then so many people have talked about, you know, missing that Sunday slot that Eve was doing. So I'm going to be having a space of come up with the name Creative Seeds on Sunday, where anyone something. So, you know, if you have a workshop of healing and creative, you'd like to try out in a friendly audience, you know, please feel free to approach me. You can use my Zoom room as well. I can be your tech host, and I'm going to be offering some things on there as well to kind of fill that gap and keep that like lovely community space around creativity open. Okay, so the reason we're discussing Sedna at the moment is she's going to be making her long-awaited, the astrologers have been watching this, her ingress into Gemini, and that's going to happen on Thursday. So she's in Taurus at the moment. So the first way we could, oh, hang on, let me put the proper slideshow on. So the first way we could think of this, okay, is we're going to be this body, she's very powerful, she's going to be moving from Taurus, which is fixed earth. Nothing's going to change in fixed earth. Well, if it is going to change, it's going to change very slowly. And suddenly this goddess of the ocean and this very cold kind of frozen emotional energy is going to move into Gemini, which is a mutable air. It's like the opposite extreme elementally of Taurus. So my feeling is that what seemed to be immovable is suddenly going to have lots of possibilities and options open up. And there's also an emotional element of the water element, because Sedna is a water goddess. Oh, hang on. So this is a little picture I actually did on one of the Sunday slots where this mermaid came out. And I quite like this kind of Sedna and Gemini, more kind of upbeat than Sedna and Taurus, quite stuck in her trauma and her patterns. And then suddenly in Gemini, she's like talking, singing, dancing, maybe with her little sisters there. Yeah, so I feel like the energy is going to get lighter in this ingress. So there's other TNOs I mentioned changing signs, and particularly we should think about Pluto into Aquarius. So Pluto's now going retrograde back into Capricorn and then going to come forward into Aquarius. But all that time will be in Gene Key 60, which is called the cracking open of the vessel. So as the retrograde comes in, there's this intense pressure for things to crack open. And that could be your relationships with, you know, your family, with your partner. It could be your job. It could be in organizations, all kinds of way. And although cracking open is kind of a hard energy for us, because we really prefer things not to change if possible as humans. you know, some really good things can come out of this, because it's taking us from a very limited place, a stuck place, if you like, and then into this kind of divine justice, everything moving back into equilibrium. So Sedna will remain, even though she's changing sign, she's going to remain in the 8 for a bit longer, gene key 8, which moves from mediocrity to style to exquisiteness. And so she's really helping us find our unique self, and, you know, can almost feel like popping us out of mediocrity. And compromise is the 14, the programming partner, and into our kind of style and, you know, who we truly are in the world, rather than this kind of homogenized cultural being that so many of us have succumbed to being mediocre, because to not be mediocre basically means to take some big risks in life. I mentioned this book before by Rick Rubin, who's a music producer, it's about being a creative, and it's such a fantastic book if you're feeling stuck in mediocrity and you can't express your sort of creative self. It's such an excellent book. And then not long in the future, Sedna will pop into the 20. So that's going to be interesting, because that is like pure presence, and it feels like she's going to be very powerful there. So she was discovered 14th of November 2003. I forgot to look up actually what her gene key was then. Okay, so we're going to look at 4 themes of what Sedna can represent in the birth chart. You can find her on Taraka. A lot of us will have her around the same place. I've got her in the 27, born in 1970. Some of you may have her in the 3 as well, which is a very mutative gene key. So she'll be very powerful in the 3. And put in the chat if you know where she is. Okay, so one of the first themes is that Sedna, she doesn't want to get married when she's young, and she loves hunting, which is unusual for female archetypes to like hunting. So what we know about her immediately is she's got a strong inner masculine element, but under the sort of tribal pressure, and if you imagine like the Inuits in Greenland, Sweden, like the far northern European countries, it's very cold, very difficult conditions to live in. And so breaking tribal norms becomes kind of more and more hard, the harder your survival conditions are. But nonetheless, Sedna is kind of programmed to break these tribal traditions. And her husband is a bird shaman who she eventually marries, and he's very cruel to her, keeps her in a frozen nest. And so her father does go to rescue her, but he kind of loses his nerve under attack, and he throws her overboard, and he whacks off her fingers and her hands as she tries to cling onto the boat. And they become dolphins and whales, which is quite beautiful, really. But she goes through this kind of massive traumatic event. So one of the ways I've really identified in the last 9 months, like the Sedna story, is about clinging on to things, like how painful it is when we try and cling on, whether it's a relationship or identity. You know, it feels like Sedna's energy, you can't cling on anymore. It's like taking everything from you and you have to sink into this really dark place in the ocean, cold place, which none of us really want to go there. I certainly don't. And I feel myself thrown there quite a lot in the past year, periodically, not all the time, but But there's a kind of a need for the acceptance of going into this void in order to be reborn. Okay, so some of you might remember astrologer called Deirdre came and did a session with me on Soul Tribe. And in this variation of the Sedna myth, Sedna is actually more of a protagonist in her family and less of a victim, which she is portrayed in most of the stories. So in this other version of the Inuit myths, if you imagine the Inuits, they've got loads of tribes, so there's actually quite a lot of variations of the story. And in this particular one, which Deirdre shared with me, it was very disturbing because Sedna bites off the hands and arms of her parents, and eventually they can't cope with her. They like send her out into the sea on a boat to die. And it kind of got me really in a deep contemplation about people, which I think all of us are in our family, who are the chain breakers of cultural patterning, and how close that can come to being thrown out of the tribe. You know, some of us may literally at times have been thrown out of the tribe, or in my case, you know, I left my family because of this kind of pressure to give up my life to be my dad's carer who has Parkinson's. And I just knew I couldn't do it, you know, but it was very hard to not succumb to that pressure of being the carer, the daughter carer. So this is something else that Sedna can bring. Like we have to break the chain of emotional shit in our family, and we're going to do it whether we get kicked out or not. So it's quite an extreme sort of energy that Sedna brings. Okay, so these are some things I found that Kim Gould says, which I think are really helpful as well. So she calls the first aspect of Sedna is our relationship to Gaia. Sedna represents our need to get back in balance with nature, to get some humility around that. A key part of the Sedna myth was the ritual of soothing her when things weren't going well, combing her hair, dancing around her. Sedna could choose to feed her people or not. When there were no fish and people were hungry and afraid, the men would gather to apologize to Sedna, to make amends for selfish greed, for taking too much, for offending the underlying harmony of nature. Yes, so it's interesting. A lot of us will have Sedna in the 27, which is all about selflessness. But also I feel like Sedna, and I feel this in myself as well, has some deeply entrenched victimization patterns from her own trauma. And so sometimes we just want people to soothe us in that trauma. But maybe there's a time, and this time is with Gemini energy, to actually break out of the need to be soothed in our trauma, if we have that pattern, and to kind of let go of the victim story, I guess, which is all part of the 55 gene key, the evolutionary leap. Okay, so this is a second one, which was really fascinating because I really experienced this illness, the sudden illness with Adam, as a shamanic initiation for both of us, but definitely for me. So Sedna brings our deepest soul mission and how we might have struggled to grasp what it is, because it exists at a higher level of consciousness. But this too requires that we soothe Sedna. And to do so, we have to withdraw from society and descend to our deepest places in a shamanic journey to find our own truth. People who have a significant Sedna activation in their design will have experienced at least one great disconnect in their lives, where they were forced to let go of one life and embrace another more divine aspect of self. So yeah, have a think about this, you know, what planets do you have at the end of Taurus and beginning of Gemini? Because they're going to be really activated strongly by Sedna right now. Okay, so fascinating, because this Roman god, Mors-Somner, is also traveling with Sedna at the end of Gene Key 8. And I read this and just so reflects what Adam was experiencing. He's on this isolation ward. You're not allowed to go out the door. And all he's got is this clock there and it tells the date as well. But it was like really kind of comforting to him, almost like his only connection to the outside world, apart from me and the nurses in all their kind of PPI, was this clock on the wall. So, oh, hang on. I always manage to do that, don't I? Hop back to where I was. Right, so you'll see the connection in a minute. So this is something I found written about Mors-Somner from kind of ancient literature. It's a poem. Beyond the reach of the rays of the sun, in the depths of a cavern of a distant and calm valley, so densely covered with poppies that the reconcentrated air was unbreathable, lived the brothers Somner's dream and Mors' death. Somner slept beyond time, lying on a black-lined ebony divan, while Mors dressed with an armor and a black mantle and was staring at a finite hourglass. So when I read that about Mors' death and Somnus, you know, being in this dream state and Adam in this isolation ward, it's just like I completely felt him to be in this archetype. So as we know, I mean, we've probably all been through some kind of illness ourselves, that it can really snap us out of mediocrity and compromise. And interesting, I was talking about the star of consciousness just before we came on the call, and I'm in the first group that's flying, and I'm in the Love Delta, and I've actually got the 14 this month, which is this programming partner to the 8. So really feeling this, you know, like need to really grasp life with everything I have and take risks and live life like completely from my devotion. And I mean, I haven't really been holding back that much, but I feel like I've been pushed even more to, you know, get out there and, well, maybe not even get out there, but it's more about just feeling the intensity of life in all its glory and all its challenges. So Mors-Somner and Sedna together represent a powerful shamanic initiation through death. So you can look on Taraka as well, like what planets do you have in Gene Key 8 and 14? They will be activated. Where they are in your chart can tell you something about your own shamanic initiation. Okay, so seeing where we're at. So I was just sort of feeling into the end of our Pearl sequence as well. And I came across this, which Richard Rudd talks about in what's called the quantum pathway. So from our Pearl, we kind of don't have one pathway out. It opens this quantum field. And this is what these trans-Neptunian objects are all about, opening our consciousness to this quantum field. So I'll just read this to finish this presentation part. So the quantum is also true at a collective level. Human beings are like individual chemical codes that, when arranged and combined in certain formations, like we are, can give rise to a quantum intelligence, an intelligence so far beyond our individual understanding that we cannot even conceive what it might be like. This is the intelligence referred to in the gene keys as the synarchy. This transcendent possibility and the quantum leap that makes it possible forms the heart of the gene keys transmission, is captured in the microcosm in the 22nd and 55th gene keys. We stand on the threshold of such a great change. No one knows when it will occur, and in truth, no one knows if it will occur, but it seems to be an intuitive knowing held by all human beings. It is not something to hope or pray for, rather it is something just to allow as a possibility while we continue about our lives. The possibility of the boundless opens the door for miracles. The pathway of the quantum is a pathway of absorption. Absorption is the culmination of contemplation. And at the heart of this, I found this like mystical union of light, which began with Adam, but it definitely spread out through the field. So it's not really something personal that happened here, even though it kind of happened to us. It happened. It almost felt like a supernova had gone off in some other galaxy somewhere, and this kind of breaking through of the light happened. And just, you know, being quite closely connected with some of you through that process, through the daily practice on Soul Tribe. So one example was the day Tara posted this amazing quote by this Christian mystic Jeffries about wisdom and love as contagions. That was the day Adam got admitted to the contagious infectious diseases unit, and he didn't even have an infectious disease. That was like the weirdest part of it. But suddenly having to cope with this, like not being able to touch each other, or the PPI, the separation, was in some ways like almost as hard as him nearly dying, was dealing with totally press my wound of separation buttons. But all along I was feeling weaving through the field like messages of hope, and this is why you're going through this, and this is what you're trying to heal the wound of separation and come into unity consciousness in light, going through this. And I feel it was for all of us really, and anything you go through as well is for all of us too. It's not like I'm some special person who went through this. I certainly wouldn't wish it on anyone either. So yeah, these initiations can be really intense, and just to know that we're here for each other, I think can be really wonderful. Okay, so we're going to go into the next part now and do some light language, and then we'll have conversation. Yeah, go to the camera. Yes, so just Danny's mentioned 22nd of July is also our third eye Venus gate on that date. So it's quite exciting. It's on the festival of Mary Magdalene. So we have got a combination of the 3, which is highly mutative gene key, and the 27, which is a selfless energy that can come through. Okay, so let's tune to, we've all been in this place. It's probably a place we avoid, but let's kind of, I'm going to stop the recording actually as well for this.